Welcome to Rob's Country. This week we're going to be talking about farm accounting. We're going to have a look at a corporate dairy farm in the Taranaki, which has been run from, funnily enough, Auckland. And also we're going to be talking about what's going down in Australia, but that's later in the program. First up though, major breakthrough in ethanol production.
Yes, Rob. American scientists have come through with something that they've been trying to crack for many, many years, and it will enable us to use crop residues, which is things like wheat straw, barley straw and that sort of thing, to produce ethanol. As you're probably aware, in the old composting system there was yeasts and all sorts of things used, but they've come through with a genetically modified bacterium where they can put product in the front end, and out the back end comes ethanol, and basically it breaks down the fibres and the lignins in cellulose, and cellulose is very indigestible. But this apparently, without any preconditioning, will break it right down, and so all those crop residues and producing ethanol from waste is something that scientists have been trying to do for many, many years. And it looks like they've cracked the nut, and we could be into producing some reasonable priced ethanol for the future.
Gee, that'd be huge.
Oh, massive, massive. It's all about breaking down the likes of wheat straw, which, you know, even put in the soil, you bring it up 4 or 5 years later, it's still intact because the cellulose in it. But if you can break that down, and it could be wood chips, all sorts of things. It's endless.
Barley price out, the malting price?
Yeah, Malt Europe have come out with their second offering for malting barley this year, albeit $5 a tonne less than their opening shot.
Was that?
Yeah, there was some uptake on the opening contract, but this one, things change. You know, they talk about a week in politics. Well, in farming, things change seasonally, and there's going to be a lot of spring barley go in because of the areas that didn't get planted in white clover, areas that didn't get planted in grass seed, or they were put into those crops and then the slugs took them away. We're coming into the spring looking for a sort of a neutral product that's not going to be too hard on the rotation, and maybe barley fits in there. So certainly the world signs have been on a downward trend, but I don't think Malt Europe need to lose sight of the fact that it's for New Zealand production of certain varieties of beer, certain brands of beer, and they just can't buy that malt globally. So all the information we get about what's happening on the Chicago Board of Trade and so forth, well, forget about it. Or what's happening in Australia. It's what you can grow barley for in the South Island, ship it to the North Island to produce your specialist beers. So
this is already craft beers and things, which is getting more and more.
Oh, absolutely. Or even things like Heineken and Steinlager Pure. There's only one variety goes into that, and it's not grown outside New Zealand. So there's an argument there that the growers have. But farmers are ringing me and say, what do you think? Should we sign? What should we do? And I've been right before and I've been wrong before. But
only once though.
But I think it's a reasonable offer when feed barley's at $410 a tonne for feed, so it's not too bad. And
so what is it again for?
It's $435.
$435.
Yep, yeah, delivered to Ashburton.
That's good.
So, and then those over the over the Rakaia and the Rangitata get an additional $6 cartage allowance.
And you look at someone like Bill Davey from down Rakaia way, and he's got a deal straight with Monteith. So I mean, he just produces what he produces for them, which is great. So we're going to get into that niche one-on-one, perhaps.
There's some doing that now. There's some boutique maltsters operating that way now. But you know, for the greater production in New Zealand, it does go to the big breweries in Auckland,
yep, and
it does go to Martin for processing in the North Island. So. But anyhow, so it's all interesting.
It is always interesting when you come on the program. Bees.
Yes, our friends the bees are under further threat globally. Scientists have discovered that bees that carry the blood-sucking mite varroa on their back are subjected to other infections or viruses, and there's one called deformed wing virus, which the poor little fellows, they're under all sorts of attacks. So we need to look after our bees and give them everything we can to booster them. They need some V or something to get them going, and the beekeepers do it with winter sugar. But we need to be looking at what they need, and they need shelter, they need water, and they need early spring feed from things like tree lucerne, which flowers very early. But MPI do have a list of useful forage crops that can be planted to assist bees in their winter recovery and into their summer activity. And so if we just think of them as that they are pretty vital, about the 5th most vital thing on the planet to human life. And so they are vital for our future, and we need to give them every bit of support we can give them.
What should we be doing with winter sown wheat and clovers?
Well, at the moment, when the hard frosts are on and things are dormant in the clover, especially established clover, you're looking at spraying with 2,4-D ester for broadleaf weeds. Any hair grass, which there seems to be plenty of that around, there's only really one product for that, and that's Curb, which has to go on at this time of the year. If you put it on too much later when the soil warms up, the bacteria in the soil actually consume the spray, so they eat it before it has a chance to do its job through the roots of the grass. So no choice when things are really dormant and quiet, you use Curb for hair grass. You may be looking at things like spinnaker, those sort of things. On wheat crops, some people have missed the spraying early when they were planted. There is a chance to catch up with some other products. If you've got grasses, something like Simplicity looks quite useful. So, yeah, there's monitor those fields and do something.
Brilliant. Dennis, as always, thank you very much indeed. After the break, we're talking farm accounting. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Our credit rating. New Zealand's got a rating, and as most countries do. How are we looking?
Yeah, there's several agencies that give us credit ratings, and yesterday we had Fitch come out, and they've come out and said that New Zealand's got a positive outlook, so we've moved from stable to positive, which is a good move. It sort of indicates that we're doing the right things as an economy, and they've also reaffirmed our long-term credit rating as a AA, so it's pretty strong, but they did have a couple of warnings in there for us.
Like what?
Well, last time I was on, we talked about the fact that we relied on a couple of main products. They've come out and said that commodity prices is a concern for us. For the economy to keep going the way it is, they need to remain strong. They also have a bit of a warning about the fact that reliance on China and Australia is a couple of our main markets, and of course China's the big one, and that is always going to be a vulnerability for us, and also just the level of our external borrowings. We've got to go try and get those down if we can, and if we do, we'll keep going the way we are.
So niche marketing, niche products?
Yeah, just basically I think it's got to broaden our base of trade and the products out there. Don't be reliant on a couple of the dominant economies, see if we can get elsewhere. And
eggs in more than one basket, or in this case more than two baskets.
Exactly, yes indeed, yeah.
What's it going to mean to people in New Zealand, like the farmers and people in town?
Down on the farm, probably the biggest impact will be the New Zealand dollar and the prices they'll pay for the inputs onto the farm, such as fertiliser, plant purchases, etc. And then, of course, the price they receive for what they produce. Yesterday, with the announcement coming out, the New Zealand dollar jumped slightly.
Upwards.
Upwards. So it was slightly stronger. The market seemed to take it as a good indicator that things were going well, which, of course, means that for our exporters, things get a little bit tougher. But if you're an importer, it's fantastic news.
Oh, so fuel prices should come down then?
You'd like to think so, but I think the fuel company will absorb those somehow.
Yeah, exactly. There's a unison of people laughing throughout the whole country.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is the dollar likely to do?
The forecast is that we're going to hit record highs. It's going to hit over 88.42 cents, which we achieved back in August 2011. So if we get to those sort of levels, we're well up above where we have been in the past, which is just going to make it even tougher for the exporters out there.
And Harry, that's not just against American, they will go against the Australian dollar and everybody else.
Yeah, all those will follow. But of course we measure it against the American being the dominant one. And people are sort of saying, oh, it must be because New Zealand economy is strong, that sort of thing. It is, but it's also because the US dollar is actually weak. Obviously they've got a few internal problems over there. So people are looking to other currencies to get in on, and New Zealand dollar is the one that sort of stands out.
We at one stage had a fixed dollar rate, didn't we? Was that under Muldoon? I think it was you were probably
we
short
were
pants,
actually. But there was. But now, obviously we're on the market.
The whole world is now floating, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Now, you wanted to talk to me about crowdfunding.
Yeah, people probably know crowdfunding through sites like Pledge Me and Give a Little, where you can donate to people that want to, have got a sort of a cause they want to get in behind, such as a charity or something like that. Well, back in April, the government made moves that you could actually do it for businesses, and there might be an opportunity for farmers here, depends on what they're looking at. How it works is that you come up with an idea or a project, you try and get funding. If you're a bit short, you go out to the general public world and say, look, I'm going to sell you a share of this, you give me some money and I'll give you some shares, and hopefully they make a return in the long run.
So you're going to have to expand a bit more than that, because you haven't got me yet.
It's a mechanism of getting extra money where the bank won't get in behind you. So if you're a farmer, you've come up with, say, an idea of a piece of machinery that's going to revolutionise the world.
Yep. So this is sort of an invention type thing, and
so
you're going to pay.
You go to the bank and they sit there and laugh at you because they don't believe that you're going to get that far. You can then go out there and say, look, I've got this idea. I'll give you 10% of my idea for 100,000, for example, and that person buys it, and then they become involved in that business with you. So they're partners, basically. It's a good, cheap way of getting money because you don't have to give them anything up front other than some shares. They take the risk whether it makes a profit or not. If it makes a profit, well, hopefully they get a dividend in return. Whereas if a bank gets in behind you, obviously you've got to start paying interest from the first dollar you borrow.
So how do people at the other end, people who want to invest in a new machine, for the want of a better term?
Yeah, well, this will come out on the market. Like the first licence has just been issued this week, and that's for a money lender. But as people come up with ideas, you apply for a licence, and then you put it out there on websites, around the world, news articles, press releases, etc., and basically say, look, here I am. Come and give me some money.
So it's once again, it's a computer website.
More often than not, yes, and that's how all the sort of ones of these personal causes, etc., has taken off. Being that it's a new sort of idea, it's hard to know which way it'll go, but the expectation it will be in the online world.
Oof, okay. As far as what people should be doing this time of year, you've got people who would have just closed off at the end of June.
Yes, yep, the end of the financial year's been and gone, and they really should be sitting down, getting their books tidied up and getting them into the accountant. Thinking about the budgets again, starting forecasting, talking to the bank manager, the little things that you have to do annually to keep them happy.
How often do you as a chartered accountant want to see your clients and go through budgets and fine-tune such
Some
things?
of them we're in there sort of monthly, others quarterly, depends on how skilled they are basically, and how well they want to do. Some are reasonably happy, every 6 months, just a quick chat and a bit of a review, but if you want to make some decent coin, then it's better to sit down and plan as you go and then react, on a monthly basis rather than sort of waiting 6 months later and go, oh, I missed that one, what could I have done better?
Because you look at dairying, and you and I have talked about this, the fact that the price is likely to come down and is starting to creep down, interest rates are going up, and the bit in the middle is getting very skinny.
Yes, yeah, and so our dairy guys, I've got them on monthly reporting, so we're reporting actuals against budgets for them, and then if we've got real concerns over anything, we're actually sitting down on farm or in the office with them and saying, right, these are the key areas you've got to start looking at, and we're taking action now, and hopefully they'll...
What sort of openings are there for you if somebody's suddenly getting to that margin area and you're starting to perspire on their behalf?
Well, the first thing we look at is what costs they've got, see what we can trim there, whether if they've got debt borrowings, whether you can negotiate with the bank for different terms. Some banks have got them on heavy principal and interest payments, which can hurt your cash flow. So your overdraft keeps going up and up and up. That's sort of one of the first things we look at is what the bank's doing and what costs there, because it's usually the biggest. And then we sort of go through line by line of all the other things and work out what's necessary or not.
And the secret is communicate with your accountant. Don't be scared of he or she.
Yes, yeah, you've got to be open and honest. If we don't know what is really happening, if you've got a couple of things planned, you don't tell us and it wasn't necessary, you can expect to be wrapped over the knuckles, basically.
Not by you, but by somebody else, the tax man.
Yes, yep, definitely.
Thank you very much indeed. So how often have you heard me say communication, and don't be scared of them, because if they can find out where you're going wrong, they can put you back on course. Corporate dairy farming seems to be on everybody's lips at the moment. I caught up with a corporate dairy farmer in Taranaki, but it's got a very long family history.
Well, it's got a lot of history here. There was 5 generations of the Fall family coming out here from England in 1840, and it started off as a very small family operation of 80 to 100 acres, and of course now we're up to over 1,000 acres. so it's been through our families. It's never been out of the family. My father was involved when he was young, and then we had leased and share milk for a number of years. In the last 20 years, my generation, myself, have got really involved in driving the business and growing the business.
And you've got another generation coming through.
Sure, I've got my son, Oliver, who's managing the property for me out of our Auckland office, and he's here every 2 weeks. And he's getting involved, even though he's a chartered accountant, he's getting involved in agriculture and starting to learn. And he's got two brothers. One's a civil engineer, the other's an IT specialist, and really they're also involved. But he's the one who does all the work.
Oliver, a Queen Street farmer, literally. Is that the way we're heading, corporate type farming?
I'd say we're not necessarily corporate farmers, but we're something in between. There's a very strong family influence there, and family ownership and family involvement, but we're certainly introducing a few more corporate things, such as I guess the Ag Hub system is one of the newest examples of that, which just means that from our Auckland office we can see everything that's going on from how long effluent irrigators have been going during the day, exactly which paddock they've been in, to the up-to-date weekly feed wedge from the feed reader. So I think it's just giving us that extra bit of transparency from Auckland.
Can I comment a little bit about this corporate farm point, which comes up a lot? And it's, as I said, it's a fifth generation farm, and the biggest problem in the dairy industry today is how do you hang on to your dairy farm, and how do you pass on your dairy farm? And making each generation pay for it, this keeps moving the mortgage between one generation and another. And so my aim here is that this farm can be run as a business. They're proud of their heritage, but we can run it as a business, and it's economically viable. Because now, a 100-acre dairy farm, you can't live off it. So it's really I want to pass on something which is really economically viable, and I think is the only approach to succession planning.
It's got quite technical during your lifetime.
It's got very technical. When we built this wonderful super shed 7 years ago, I flew to Ireland to have a look at the systems to be used. I looked at lots of systems, but I was looking for a system which was not labour intensive, could help expansion, and also help the information and provide information so we can monitor what we're trying to do, because that's the only way to keep the economics going the right way. So yes, it's got technical, however, it's still, you need good weather, good management, and a good team.
And good information.
And good information, yes.
Very good information.
Tell me about your calf feeding system.
Calf feeding system, basically after we built the super shed, we turned the old herringbone cow shed into a fully automated calf feeding system. So basically, we can fit quite a few calves in there, and they can basically all feed themselves. So they have chips in their ears. The system identifies them when they go in for a feed, and they'll only get one feed over a certain period of time. So I guess it just minimises the labour aspect in that. And also another addition to that is in the last year we've built a really large other calf shed, which is not as automated, but it just means that calving is much more centralised. So instead of using all the available sheds over the farm and wasting a whole lot of people's time sort of going all over the farm to feed and look after the calves, we've now centralised it. So we're sort of looking at all sorts of ideas like that to drive efficiency and also minimise payroll for our sheep milkers.
Stockmanship and stock, not important, it's vital.
It's critical. It's getting that extra kg of milk solids out of that cow, making sure it produces, making sure it's in good health. And we do have a farm advisor who's a fully qualified vet, so we take it very seriously. And I'd like to make the point that the share milker and the owners, we're actively managing. So, Oliver is the general manager of this property, so we get involved. So we're as keen for the share market to make money as for us to make money. And that's why we're involved in herd management. That's why we have these Ag Hub systems. So we work together and make sure we maximise productivity, and as you say, herd management is critical.
You're wearing the balance hat. They play an important part of the farm and the management?
Well, you know, this is the exciting thing. You know, I really got heavily involved 20 years ago when we had 100 acres, and I really had to develop this farm from nothing. I had difficulty in learning. I had difficulty in communicating because people were just sort of suppliers, and you know, fertilizer application. I'm saying, you know, how do I really know what I'm doing? How do I really know what the environment's doing? Am I looking after the future? Am I being environmentally sensible? And of course, because there's a lot of noise, a lot of talk about pollution, a lot of talk about the use of water on dairy farms, and you know, especially living in Auckland, I get a little bit of dinner party. You know, people push me saying, you know, you're polluting our country. So Balance comes in and they talk to us about this, and they help us. And they're not there just to sell us something. They're there to help us to maximise and maximise productivity at a, if you like, minimal application. So they're also part of our management team. Hence the Ag Hub system. Hence Oliver's sitting at his computers in Auckland, talking to the share market, and half an hour later he'll talk to the Balance rep and say, hey, are we doing it right, or what should we be doing? So that's a whole new philosophy.
I guess.
And Oliver, I was just going to say.
Yeah, I could probably provide further details on that. Okay, so a perfect example is, I guess many farmers sort of use, you know, blanket fertilising, and what we're trying to do here is a couple of years ago we decided to make the investment of all paddock testing. So we'll test the fertility of every paddock on the farm, and from there we can actually work out, you know, what it's lacking, and then further from there we discuss with our Balance rep how we're going to tailor the fertiliser application to those paddocks. So, for example, one of our most recent applications of fertiliser was we grouped paddocks on the farm into 3 groups depending on their fertility and what they were lacking, and therefore we could basically minimise the amount of fertiliser we were putting on and tailor to those 3 groups or 3 types of paddocks, and you know, I guess get a lot more bang for buck, as well as looking after the environment and minimising the fertiliser that was actually applied to those paddocks.
As an accountant, every dollar is very important.
It's very important actually, especially when it comes to farming, because farming is incredibly capital intensive, and the things we do around here are sort of big plays, big investments, and they're long-term plays. They're not an overnight plug or a fix. We, you know, if we think that our main races in and out of the supershed complex need to be concreted, we'll concrete them, and therefore, you know, you can see over time that by the time you maintain those really well-used races, you know, you're almost spending as much, but obviously you've got that massive investment right at the start. But yeah, it should pay off because they're long-term investments.
What more information, if any, would you like?
I guess
I would say we'd like more accurate information from Jim Hickey. Weather control.
There's nothing I could say to that.
I guess we're heading the way in the direction of getting more and more information, especially through cloud-based computing. So, for example, in the last couple of years, we transitioned all our businesses to the Xero accounting system, and that provides so much more up-to-date financial information. So that's obviously much better for management, because if you don't have the figures, how can you manage? So that's providing a lot more up-to-date and timely information on the financial side, and also on the operational side. We've got the Ag Hub system, which is providing huge amounts of information from everything from you know, where and when at what application rate and what concentration rate we're redistributing the effluent through the smart hydrants, to how much dry matter are we producing on a weekly basis, looking at the feed wedge and how that's responding to fertiliser application and effluent redistribution. So we're starting to get a bit more scientific, and we've identified that the more scientific we get and we make the changes, there's potential for material improvements and benefits out of that.
Can I just make a comment? This is hugely exciting. I can remember my grandmother saying, next year is going to be better. And our farm next year will be better. And what we're doing now, we're going to make sure next year is better, because we have information and we're planning. So we're just not just hoping it'll be better, we're doing everything we can.
The Balanced Environmental Awards.
Well, as you know, I'm an international businessman. I have 125 hotels around the world. So we're really running. And I tell people, I'm always happy, but I'm never satisfied. And when we won these awards, I was blown away, because, and a little bit embarrassed to win 5 or 6 awards out of the 11 awards, because I still think there's much more we can do on the farm, and I still have lots of ideas on what we should be doing. And so I am saying there's a lot more to do, but it was unbelievable. It's very encouraging for our team. It's encouraging for me that we're actually going in the right direction. And so the motivation of these awards is fantastic.
And there's a spiritual side. You've unveiled a special stone this morning.
Yes, we've just this morning we've brought on site here a carving called the Maua, which means you and I, and it's togetherness and working as a team. And this was blessed today by our local Maori priest and the lady who's looked after me when I was very young, and her son carved it. And it's to us, I think it's important that we feel that we have a spiritual relationship with the soil, with the animals, with the agriculture. And so this was a very appropriate day to bring it here and bless this beautiful carving.
Wonderful thing, teamwork, isn't it? And that's obviously exactly what's making that place tick. We find out what's making Australia tick straight after the break. Well, some say that he sounds like me, others say that he looks like me, and in fact he is, my brother, Gordon, living in Australia. What's happening in Aussie, buddy? You just had a budget that there's mixed opinions on.
Yes, the Australian budget's been quite interesting, actually, altogether. Personally, I thought it was an absolutely stunning budget, because it addressed the cash flow problem. I mean, Australia has been subjected to some very interesting Labor governments for the last 7 years.
Interesting being a very loose sort of...
very loose term. The end result, of course, was a massive foreign debt, and we're borrowing massive amounts of money. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars just to pay the interest on the debt. And you can't go on living like that. So Tony Abbott has done some pretty interesting accounting. He's got a couple of detractors that are not agreeing, like every university student in Australia. So we've had a lot of riots.
Green.
Yeah, that's right, plus the Greens and everybody else. But he has addressed the problem, and he's just done what had to be done. And everyone's talking about this disastrous budget that's going to slash the incomes of working class Australians and so on. Excuse me, no. Taxes are not going up. Beer has not gone up in price. Nobody worries about cigarettes anymore. So, no, the whole thing's an absolute farce. But he's done the right thing. And we have 2 years for people to forget the pain.
We've got media reports saying that people are hurtling back into New Zealand because Aussie's going backwards and it's not a place to live and It's hitting the wall.
Oh, that's probably good. Will that lift the intelligence
IQ of
quota
both sides. Yeah, I know.
sides of the
There was
test?
Muldoon saying about going the other way, all right?
Yeah, we had that, I must admit. It's a very old and very tired joke altogether.
Yeah,
I
it's still a
think
good
the biggest thing that everyone's really talking about is the mining boom, the China boom is over. Well, sorry, that's just a lot of nonsense, because it costs an awful lot more to ship iron ore from Brazil to China than it does from Australia to China. It's just straight up the same time zone to China. And the small cap miners are all beginning to pick up. BHP's profit is being maintained, as is Rio's. No, the China boom is certainly not over. But I tell you where to make money seriously is wait until China starts recycling, and then metal recyclers. That'll be the investment for if you want to put money into China. But China's going well. I mean, we're exporting a lot of wine to China now. In fact, I even sold 500 dozen of our Cope Williams sparkling wine to China last year, and actually got paid for it before it left the winery.
That would be a first.
That was good. That was a first, yeah.
Did you have to relabel it?
Yes, funnily
So it
enough.
wasn't actually sold as Cope Williams Romsey?
Oh yes, it's still Cope Williams Romsey, but it was a red label that had 888 on it, all over it.
Okay. I should
Sorry.
have expected that.
Yeah, with a back label as well, to explain the front label.
So, yes, look at Cope Williams Winery in Romsey. How's the season been?
It's been fantastic. Actually, the yields were down. I mean, a lot of the Yarra Valley was down by 60%. I mean, vineyards that normally pick 100 tonnes were picking 40 or 50. And we were down. We only crop at 2 tonnes to the acre in any case. But the quality was absolutely superb. We'll be doing a vintage sparkling wine this year for the, actually the third time since 1977 that we've actually done a vintage.
I'll get you to explain what you mean by a vintage year, because you make a vint
Right.
every year.
No, that's a cuvee.
That's-
Yeah, the cuvee's the blend.
I knew this was going to be hard work.
All right. Every so often, the Chardonnay in particular is of such beautiful balance, with just the right structure, just the right pH and TA, and the right sugar. Everything's right about it. And we do a Blanc de Blanc, a Chardonnay vintage, just one variety from 1 year, and that is a vintage year in terms of sparkling wine. The rest of the time, every other year, we do a...
Well, all the other years,
All the
because
other
you've only had
years,
3.
yeah, that's right, only 3 since 77. Is simply a cuvee of that year. In other words, 60, 70% maybe of the fruit that's picked that year goes into the 2013, for instance, cuvee, and all the rest of it is reserve wine, going back maybe 10, 15, 20 years. We keep an awful lot of wine in reserve, in barrel, in tank, sometimes in magnums or Jeroboams and so on. And that becomes our blending material. And you'd be surprised what a difference 1% of a 25-year-old base wine will make to a cuvee when you're blending. See, in Champagne, most champenois don't drink vintage. They drink the house style. They drink the cuvee of the year, which has just been put together.
So this excellent, magnificent one of 3 since 1977. How do people recognise it? Do you put vintage and
I'll put a
2040?
very expensive-looking label and put it in a very expensive-looking package, and then people will say, "Nice wine, but I reckon 25% of that wine is the packaging." Yeah, and so on. Look, it's all nonsense, isn't it? Marketing and merchandising.
Yeah. But I mean, what I'm driving at is that obviously not just you, but other wineries would have vintage years, and that's the bottles that we look at.
So quite a number. The vast majority would actually declare a vintage every year, so that
really?
they'll have every year. That's all they do, and that's why so many Australian sparkling wines are so one-dimensional, because they just don't have any depth of flavour. You don't have that patina of age about them. I mean, we're still selling 2000 cuvee and 1998 cuvee, which is terrific. And the other day I found 102 dozen magnums from 1994 and 95. Now, don't ask me why or how, but because we do so much contract sparkling wine, my little 5,000 dozen a year gets put in the back of the warehouse somewhere and gets lost. And people don't worry about it over in the winery about my inventory, because they're so concerned about theirs that they make money on. They don't make any money out of mine. So I found 102 dozen magnums, and it's stunning.
Right, I'm coming over in August.
You are in there, August.
It's not a bad sort of a find to find in the back of the cupboard, is it really? We'll have more for you on Rob's Country straight after the break. Welcome back to Rob's Country. You just had your Federated Farmers National Conference. The heavies turned up.
They did indeed. So 3 days in Palmerston North at the end of last week, and we were lucky enough to be addressed by John Key, David Cunliffe, Russell Norman and Winston Peters, all back to back on agricultural policy. Must be election year, Rob.
I think it could be, actually. What was the sort of the précis of where they want to help the farming world?
Well, it was really encouraging to see that every leader acknowledged the role that agriculture plays in our economy, and that role is probably going to get larger rather than smaller. Mm-hmm. So that was really encouraging to see. I think probably I'd say, in my view, National, John Key and David Cunliffe had the most comprehensive agricultural policies of the four parties, and probably not that different really, except obviously around emissions trading scheme and entering agriculture into the ETS. Obviously National aren't intending to, Labor want to. Capital gains tax, obviously Labor are interested in that, though exempting the rural family home. National of course are not. And money for research and development. So a bigger commitment to that from Labor than National, but of course that comes at a price, the price being resource rentals for irrigation water to fund it.
Yeah, and farmers aren't all that keen on sort of adding more costs and compliance, are they?
I think it comes down again to what it's for, and of course once you set up structures like that, then sometimes people get a little bit nervous about where it goes. So that was interesting. Of course the other thing that we have to remember these days when you listen to Labor policy on these things is that of course it will be partnered with the Green Party as well, should they get elected, so that has to be added on.
So, and you were saying that emissions is a fairly large chunk of the conversation?
Yes, it is. So emissions trading scheme, of course, is one of those things where at the moment agriculture is not part of it. And I think you and I talked before about, despite not being part of the ETS, New Zealand farm agriculture has reduced its carbon emissions by 1.3% per unit of production every year for the last 7 years. So, it does beg a question, why would you pop it in when it's doing so well without being part of it?
It's not broken, so...
It's not broken, and I think it's probably a philosophical thing than an actual need to do it, but that was one of the key differences, of course. Any
comments or promotional ideas to help production and get production exported?
Of course, National are still on their policy of doubling agricultural exports by 2025, and the one thing I think that probably still stands out about that is, we're doubling agricultural exports by 2025. We're talking about continued irrigation and water storage schemes, particularly to irrigate those free draining soils on the east coast of both islands. Yep. But we still haven't joined the dots between that and the water quality issues that we're facing. And of course, with decisions coming out like the EPA decision for Ruataniwha, the dam in the Tukituki catchment, making it very clear that it's quite hard at the moment with the information and technology we have to continue to irrigate and intensify those land uses without increasing nitrogen losses and so forth. So there's still some dots to be joined there.
Yeah, there is, and you guys are working hard on it though as a federation, obviously.
We are, yes, and of course we've got our new national board in place now, but very much business as usual from what I could gather in terms of particularly in the environmental space, animal welfare, some of those issues that have been in place, and water is still obviously going to be the major issue to face farmers for the next few years.
How's membership going? Because I know you guys are always looking for new members because you represent all the farmers.
We do, and membership is growing steadily at about 5% each year, so that's good. We did have Federated Farmers suffered a membership drop in the early part of the century when the board took a harder line on environmental matters. We must be going in the right direction because we've gained most of that membership back and we're increasing all the time, so that's really good. Really pleased to see that in North Canterbury we'd increased our membership by 150 since December 2013 and where we are now, so that's great.
That's good. I mean, you've got huge resources. I mean, the guys who come in here from your office and talk about what they're doing with the councils, and it's an amazing organisation.
It is, and I think that's the thing people need to realise. There's always going to be some issues that members won't agree with the national policy and within Feds on something, particularly those more controversial ones like environment, animal welfare, because a lot of personal values come in. But there's a whole lot of work Feds do which is in the interests of all farmers. Great example just now, getting an exemption for all farm buildings from the earthquake strengthening regulations. So that's saving every farmer in the country more than your annual subscription straight away, just in that one quiet little battle with Wellington that no one knows anything about until we get the result.
Because the challenge you've got is that people are going to get that anyway if they're a member or not, which is a tough one.
Yes, it is. So our membership sits at about 75% of farms, but you're absolutely right. There are the people who benefit without paying, but if that gets too low, if there are too many free riders, if you like, in the system, then obviously Federated Farmers doesn't have the resources to carry on those battles. So, it is worth the membership.
Absolutely.
Of course I would say that.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, and the other thing is that it's a career path that people can get into and learn about public speaking and learn about business and learn so much other stuff.
Absolutely, and when we do have issues that people don't agree with, they don't agree with the national policy is going, you've got two options. You either don't get involved or you do get involved and change the direction.
Well said, Linda. Thank you very much indeed. We've got more for you on Rob's Country after the break. Well, I've just recovered from my brother finding 120 dozen magnums. Recovered enough to get him back in. We've just been hearing, Gordy, about the environment and the things that how we're focusing here. What's happening in Aussie as far as environment is concerned?
It's major, as Lindy was just saying, Greens and the ALP, the Labour Party, the Australian Labour Party, are the big single problem. We also have an unfortunate situation in the Senate now where a fellow called Clive Palmer has got himself and two or three other twits into the Senate. And the Senate's the House of Review. You abolished your upper house many, many years ago.
Yeah, we learnt pretty quick on them.
You learnt very quickly, and unfortunately, it's one thing we haven't learnt from New Zealand at all. And Palmer now has the balance of power in the Senate.
Palmer is
He is the Palmer United Party. It's a new party, but he has sort of green alliances and some very, very strange views.
Tell me how the Senate works, because you've got your government, your federal government, and underneath that you've got your state governments.
No. The problem is Australia is a confederation of states. And back in 1900, all the states got together and nearly got together with New Zealand, but New Zealand decided right at the 11th hour not to be involved in the federation.
Wise people, our forefathers.
Yes, I think so. I've been terribly independent ever since. But they formed a House of Representatives in Canberra, and the states were all separate governments. And because the states were independent, Victoria and West Australia, for instance, must maintain their autonomy, they said, because, it took a long time. A man on a horse took a week to get from Sydney to Melbourne. And I've always maintained that once God invented fax machines, the state government system wasn't any necessary anymore. So we have in Canberra the House of Representatives and the Senate, which is the House of Review. Then in most states there's a House of Representatives and an upper house as well.
My God, I thought we were overgoverned.
Oh, no. There's only one consolation. Thank God we don't get all the government we pay for, because that'd be really terrible.
Right.
I'm talking about the tax, which won't get onto tax. So we're very, very top-heavy with government. And then, of course, there's the councils. And the councils are very, very powerful now. In fact, they're doing half the jobs that the either House of Representatives in Canberra or the states should actually be doing.
OK, let's get back to the environment, because you've got this person that you call a twit. Who's in there?
Well, we had, and he's just had Al Gore for dinner. And Al Gore, as you all know, is an international despot. He's made so much money out
I
of...
get sued as well, okay?
Oh, no, but he's the guy that made that film, An Unfortunate Truth. And the propaganda and the amount of money that he's made out of emissions trading schemes and carbon credits and goodness knows what. And this is what I don't understand with the whole carbon thing. I mean, carbon is one of the building blocks of life, and carbon dioxide is essential. Without carbon dioxide, we're dead, all of us. So are the plants. There's nothing green. And I don't mean politically. I mean, carbon dioxide is absolutely essential. We plant trees and they generate carbon dioxide. Actually, we in the sparkling wine business do the same thing, but the government hasn't quite hooked onto that yet. Sooner or later, they're going to say, hang on, these guys are putting sugar and yeast together and generating carbon dioxide. We can't have that, which could happen. So we don't understand. And the whole green issue and emissions trading scheme, I mean, it's all the propaganda again. You show a power station putting out white smoke, which is
actually steam.
water vapour. It's, you know, and they call that greenhouse. Is water a greenhouse gas? No, it just dissipates in the atmosphere. I mean, greenhouses are filled, you pump carbon dioxide into greenhouses to help get tomatoes ripe, to help growth, to get things going. It's well known that if you happen to have a glass house next to a coal-burning power station, you get much better growth in your greenhouse than if you're down on the seaside.
So in a very short sentence, there is a problem over there and it's not going to go away?
It's a big political problem. Tony Abbott's been trying to abolish the carbon tax and he hasn't been able to get it through the Senate. Now, with the Senate being changed as of the 1st of July, he's got a good chance. The ALP has come on board at long last to abolish it.
Good on you. Good luck with that one.
Thank you.
Phone numbers you're going to be wanting to jot down are on your screen now. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you just missed Rob's Country, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.